Hey there, sci-fi fans! Welcome to Dark Loops, where creative and scholarly nerds discuss HBO's award-winning series Westworld and ponder the eternal question, what does it mean to be human? Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dark Loops Westworld. In this podcast, we discuss Westworld Season 3, Episode 7, Past Pawn. I'm your host, Dr. Scott Jordan, cognitive psychologist, philosopher from Illinois State University. Joining me on the podcast are two Maeve-loving school psychologists, Dr. Leandra Parris and Dr. Tara Rains. Leandra and Tara, please say hi, state your affiliation, and tell us the best thing that happened to you this week.
I'm Leandra Parris. I'm at the College of William & Mary, and the best thing that happened to me this week was having a virtual game of Cards Against Humanity with my family until 1 a.m. And if I'm slow today, I'm sorry, I'm hungover. So.
Perfect. Tara, how about you?
My name is Tara Rains, and I'm school psychology faculty at the University of Denver. And the best thing that happened to me this week was a happy hour with my partner's cousins from across, I guess, the globe. There were two cousins in England, one in Canada, one in Australia, and us. And so it's neat how this pandemic is like bringing people together. You know, like we could have done a Zoom call at any time to have happy hour together, but this was a great connector.
So I wonder, do you think it'll become a tradition once a month or something down the road, or?
I really think so. The way everyone connected, I really think it'll be ongoing. So that's exciting.
It's interesting. The best thing that happened to me this week was also Zoom oriented. We had our annual spring awards ceremony this afternoon, and we worked our butts off to the point where every kid who got an award had their own Zoom room at the end of the meeting so that faculty and family could go visit them in that Zoom room. I was really impressed with the people I worked with. And so it just went off without a hitch. It was totally cool. There's something I just got to say. It's brief, but to all the healthcare workers out there taking crap from protesters, you are my heroes. That's all I can say. It breaks my heart. Okay, this episode, the title is Past Pawn. So honestly, when you heard that phrase, did you know what past pawn meant?
No, I did not.
No. I didn't either, and I looked it up. And the title past pawn refers to a chess situation in which a pawn has no opposing pawns in a position that can prevent that pawn from reaching the opponent's back row and therefore being queened.
Nice.
So the question I have for you guys, so if you have a pawn and no other pawns can get in the way, you can move it straight down the board eventually and get it queened. So the question I have, is Caleb the past pawn?
Yes.
Yeah, I felt like that's what they were kind of insinuating, right? When Bernard was like, she's more creative than that. Like she will make them the object of how everything comes about. She won't be the one who does it.
I got to tell you, I think the person we learned the most about in this episode was Dolores, not Caleb, but Dolores. The things about her plan that I actually was rather surprised by is the hacking of Rehoboam, the past pawn. In other words, all these titles have these poetic undertones, right? And like once they crack Rehoboam, is it just like straight run?
I think it's Solomon. I think Solomon may actually be the pawn, right? Because Solomon is the one that was blocked by Sarek because there's a little bit of chaos in Solomon. And so what Dolores has done is cleared the way for Solomon to take over and be the king.
I think you're right. I think that's very well said. And I love what it implies for the schizophrenic AI to be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think that's pretty cool. So what were your initial reactions to the episode? Be honest.
No. This is probably one of my favorites of this season for sure. I'm very conflicted because I want Maeve and Dolores to be on the same side. watching them battle each other, like, the feminist in me is like, why you two kick-ass women got to go after each other? Like, why can't they be, like, together? But then at the same time, like, why would they necessarily need to be together? They don't need to be on the same side. They can totally do what they need to do. I'm still a little uncertain of exactly what Maeve's endgame here is. It's all about your daughter. Like, why are you sticking by Sirach's plan after everything he's done? Like, I have some questions about that.
I got a lot of questions about Maeve this episode, to be honest. And I have to ask the two of you, though, if it's the case that Maeve and Dolores are having this knockdown drag out so this white guy can become the hero, I got a little Game of Thronesy nervous, right? I mean, her coaching him on what he has.
I don't think Caleb is going to be the hero, though. I don't know if it's going to be Bernard or if it'll be Maeve or Dolores. Like, I don't know if there's going to be a hero. Like, I really don't think Westworld is the kind of world where you have to have one or the other. I think it's about defining who you are and what you're going to take and make of this new world that you're trying to create. So, I think it's just a very, like, there's a lot of complicated emotions, which is why this series is so interesting, right? Like, it makes you question everything.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Tara.
I in regards to the episode as a whole, I wanted it to move a little fast. Caleb flashback piece of it, like, for me, like, I was kind of like, rah, 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 let's go, and then it gave me a fight scene, so I felt a little shortchanged by episode.
So you felt that some of that Caleb memory stuff was basically filler. It
was filler, and then the big fight scene at the end was filler.
So you didn't.
I love the fight scene, but like, I don't know why. I don't know. I think it's just like, I would agree with you too, Tara, that like Caleb's whole backstory has been drawn out, and I don't know if it's because one of the people in his flashback is the guy who's the dad on Veronica Mars, who I absolutely love. So I was pulled in a lot quicker than I think I normally would have been. And I think we all saw that coming too, like that big reveal of like what he remembers isn't what. But I would agree it is slow moving.
Yeah.
So the episode begins with a divergence in Jakarta. Musashi's having a drink with some Yakuza colleagues. He gives a guy a case to deliver to someone, and then he gets a call from Charlotte. And I have to tell you, I love this conversation. She says, "Are you surprised?" He says, "No, I'm happy. Her plan's working well." And Charlotte says, "Well, her plan is for all of us to die. I have a new plan. I've leaked your location as someone who's eager to meet up with you." And of course, we get to see Clementine again. She says, "Hello, Musashi, Sato, Dolores, whatever it is you are." Who is Sato?
From the Shogun version.
Oh, okay.
So like the version
world,
of Maeve and
Samurai
Hector.
World.
Yeah, it's Samurai World. That's it.
Yeah.
Like the same. She's the he's the alter ego of Hector. And I will say, this moment for me, I think might be why I really loved this episode, just because it started off with like a girl power anthem.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, it was definitely a girl power anthem.
Yes, and I loved Clementine's character. I can't remember her name, but the other one as well.
The snake, the Samurai World version of the snake woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that it's the girl power moment in terms of Charlotte arguing with Musashi and then Clementine fighting Musashi. It's also a girl power moment in terms of Charloris saying, "Well, I have my new plan, and that's not Dolores's plan." So we're starting,
which is a Dolores thing to do.
Exactly. No,
yes.
That's Dolores. That is Dolores being like, "You have tripped over something you should not have messed with. I am over it, and I'm taking control." Like, oh.
I wonder how much like the main Dolores anticipated this, right? Is this part of the plan too, that they would take each other out?
I'm going to be asking big questions later about Caleb, Dolores, and Maeve again in terms of Ford, right? Because increasingly these I almost used the word hookups. Increasingly these meetings just can't be accidental.
No, it's not
right.
Chance.
The consequences that come out of these meetings cannot have been left to chance. So I think that's a good point. And I love the fact that they keep me kind of judging like who's the master plan, and then of course it challenges my idea that there has to be a master plan. And I have another glass of wine. So Musashi's trying to walk out. Hanyaro puts a samurai sword through his gut and basically opens him like a can opener, grabs his head and drags him alongside Clementine. Are they going to go after Musashi Loris's pearl? Because maybe
Yes.
they've got some access to Dolores's plan in there. Is that?
Well, that was my assumption, was that Clementine and man, I wish I knew the character's name. The woman from Samurai World. That was my assumption, is that they're going to take that back to Sarek.
Yes.
And that, because it even says, like, it says divergence and intervention on the Rehoboam thing, right? And so
right.
That they're collecting that information specifically. But I just thought it was interesting who Maeve chose for help. So like when asking Sarek to make her help, she chose Hector and her girl squad, right? Which is interesting, because even Clementine at the end was the anti-Maeve. So Clementine was the one who was killing all of the hosts as she was walking through them.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Well, maybe she did the same thing Dolores did, and that is pick people she could easily control. I mean, she was in love with Hector. He was a killer. They had a different thing going on. But the other two were, hench persons.
I mean, one is her alter ego for all intents and purposes, and the other is someone that she's been mentoring and training through the madam's house all those years. Like, I think she's got it. I think you're right. Like, there's an element of, this is my squad, however you want to define that.
So I have to get some things sorted out for myself, and so I want to run this by you too. So far, we've seen that Sarek printed copies of Hector, Clementine, and Hinyaro for Maeve to have as allies. This is the help she requested from Sarek, and this is why Sarek said to give him these 3 hosts and destroy the rest. Is that correct? Is that how you guys are thinking about this?
Yeah.
All right. Then one more final question. What was in the case?
I have no idea.
I just love it.
I wonder,
what was in the case?
I thought for a second, like, maybe that is the pearl, the real Dolores pearl, and there's like some fake out pearl instead. Because I just don't believe that Dolores could really be caught by surprise like this, right? That she would have no idea that they were coming for her.
I totally agree.
Yeah. Now, the one case turned into a gun. So there was another case?
Yeah, there was a case that was handed off, and he goes, if you don't succeed, don't come back.
And he was gone by the time the
fighting started. Yeah.
See, I think the case actually contained Marsalis's soul. Sorry.
Well done. It took me a second. I was like, wait a second.
What? I just love this show, man, because that case, it's going to come back, right?
Yeah,
it's going to be something important. So then we start the first of the Caleb memory mashups, right? And he's talking to a Trinity-looking therapist, asking him, who killed Francis? How'd you get here? And, that goes on 3 or 4 or 5 times over the course of the episode, and every time it gets a little closer to what we would call his real memory. So I'll just mention that when it happens, but not a whole lot goes on there. We then head to Sonora, Mexico, with Dolores and Caleb riding horses a la Westworld, sweeping vistas, majestic yet somber music, and the vastness and the emptiness evoke nostalgia in Dolores, and she says it's like home. Caleb doesn't get where she is. He says, did you kill all those people? And she says, I did what I had to survive. And when I heard her say that, I thought, okay, this is Ford's role for her. Also remember in season 2, Ford told Maeve she was his prized creation. She was the closest thing to his daughter. So I'm wondering, we'll talk more about Ford's motives as we go on, but he really did need a ruthless sort of person to just have an agenda and continually push it tenaciously, so that others, so that Bernard could do his thing, and so Maeve could do her thing. He says, what kind of revolution are we waging here? And she says, I lived in hell, but there was a beauty in it. The West was cruel, unjust, and chaotic, but it was a chance to chart your own course. And then I think there's this moment here that's kind of my moment, because I have to imagine they shot this scene many times where Dolores is looking off in the distance and she says, I want a place for my kind. And then she looks at Caleb rather deliberately, and it morphs into this sort of pleading look where she says, damn, dude, do I really have to explain it to you? Can't you do some of the empathetic lifting right now? I'm trying to save your kind too. And then she looks down and then she says, and for all of us to be free. And I thought, oh my God, that's a whole new dimension to Dolores's mission. She's not trying to save hosts. She's trying to save whatever that hosts and humans have in common. You might want to call it humanity. I thought it was an amazingly done scene. And, I only got that level of detail out of it because I watched it 5 times, because I have to imagine they shot it 30 times to get her emotions to come out the way they wanted to. So what do you think? Is Dolores really out there trying to save what we ever might call humanity as opposed to droids or hosts?
I think it's broader than what we're led to think at the very onset of this season, right? Or at the end of last season. Like, you think that she's out to destroy all humans and make it a host world, or make it so that hosts are lords and subjugate the humans completely. Yeah. And you find out that she's just out trying to buck the system and change it so that it's better for everybody.
No, it's
promoting equity.
Yes, my girl. And I have to say, like, I wouldn't be surprised if it changes for her. Like, I think it would be completely reasonable for her to start off with this angry, vengeful sort of, I want to be free. And then it morphs into something where, like, we all deserve that, right? So I think there's room for her agenda to have changed. And that would make a very human perspective of her journey.
Yeah. Of course, he can't do any of the heavy emotional lifting for her, right? He doesn't get what she's after. And he just says, how many more people have to die for this revolution? I mean, it's like watching a Coen Brothers script. He has no clue what she's trying to talk about. And she says, I don't know, my kind is all but extinct, but people still have a chance. So when I heard that, it was like, oh, okay, good for them. I have thought about her in a completely inaccurate way the whole season. And why the hell wouldn't she ever just have that conversation with Maeve? Why didn't they just have a conversation? Like, I'm not stuck on the host-human divide. I want to save all whatever we want to call ourselves. And that'll come into question more when they're actually trying to stab each other with knives and stuff. I mean, stop, wait, have a conversation. Then she tried, Dolores begins trying to persuade Caleb to consider himself a leader. And I have to tell you, I'm sorry, but this felt a little bit like Daenerys persuading Jon to take the Iron Throne. I mean, having watched her do all the work she's done over 3 seasons, to be in this position of power and then say, well, I have to now lift you up by your bootstraps so that you can be, I don't know, maybe she did. Well, she said lead. She asked him to lead more than one time throughout the episode. And I thought, damn, I'm just getting some creepy Game of Thrones season 8 vibes. What about you guys? Did you have any reactions like that? I mean,
I did. I think my reaction was more that some of her emotionality in this episode kind of made me feel like she knows what's coming. Like, she has a better idea of what her role is sort of spiraling into. And I think it becomes more clear when she says, this is the one that's probably going to kill me later. Like, I think she, like a good leader, thinks about sustainability and recognizes if something happens to me, someone else is going to have to step up. And I really need a human to be able to help bring this, maybe not a human, maybe it's just Caleb. I don't know. But I think she can foresee the inevitable path that she's on.
By the time we get to the end of the episode, that's exactly how it feels. She doesn't seem to be surprised where she is. She seems to feel like she successfully got Caleb in front of Solomon and got that whole conversation going. And so what I enjoy about that is they've been unrolling her character slowly, but that's because of how she's unrolling the facts slowly, right? She met Caleb. She slowly introduced himself to himself. And she's been slowly introducing himself to himself the whole season. And of course, at the end of this episode where they say he's her plan, okay, that makes sense. It comes back to how the hell they ever met though, right? Then we see Bernard, Stubbs, and William in the Mexico facility. William is surprised to find Stubbs as a host. I thought that was funny as hell. Stubbs hates William, which I absolutely love. Bernard informs them Dolores injected a virus into William that allowed her to track him and infiltrate the facility's system. Well said last week. Stubbs says to William, ha, 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 someone used your genetics for their own personal gain. William called Stubbs a can opener, says he knows where Dolores is, and they should go get her. Starts to walk away from Stubbs, who has a gun pointed at him. You're going to have to kill me. Okay. Can Stubbs kill people?
Yes.
Okay. Has he already shot and killed humans that we know of?
I think he did. Didn't he do that
Yeah, when they were trying to extract Liam, right? Didn't he take out a few people?
Yes, he did at some point, but he could only do it once. Yeah, he killed those people.
Because Bernard says, protect me at
Right.
whatever the cost. So maybe it has to be Bernard's life that is threatened at this point. I don't remember all the details. At this point, I was too busy focused on the fact that the man in black was pissing me off.
Oh, and he just
called
gets
him a
worse.
can opener.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, I thought you were the good guy, which goes back to what I said last
Oh.
time. I don't think that's where I don't think his definition is the same as mine, but I'm like, you had an opportunity to grow.
Exactly. As therapists, you must have been like, damn, dude, we did all this work. You had all this insight. And this is what we get out of it? Come on.
Yeah,
Man.
some self-righteous bullshit.
It gets worse over the course of the episode.
God.
I have to admit, I did a double take like, oh, Stubbs, why the hell didn't Stubbs just shoot him? And, well, because he can't. So I stuck with that for a bit. Later on, we see that Bernard's just trying to keep him around, but I wasn't sure. And then we find out that William is supposedly dead.
Yes, according to the records.
Okay, just so we're clear. Dolores turned William over to Sarek as part of taking over Delos, but was also working for Dolores by putting a tracker in his blood so Dolores could find the facility. But now that Dolores has had Dolores killed by giving his location to Maeve's team and has developed her own plan, maybe Dolores and Dolores are now working at cross purposes, with Dolores becoming more focused on self-determination regardless of host versus human, and Dolores focused now on killing humans, of course, because of her, horrible Darth Vader movement. Has Dolores taken over Dolores's mission?
That was a perfect Darth Vader moment. I just thought about that. Like, I was slow on that one. I missed it.
We then see Caleb remembering his time in Russia during the Crimean Civil War, and they're tracking Crimean insurgents by putting their hands on the back of their jacket, which then they can track through computers, and then they blow them up with smart bombs launched from satellites. Then Caleb,
Sorry, did we answer your question? I had muted myself because my toilet was making weird noises. Did we answer your question, though, about what was actually happening in that?
Well, because what it seems to me is everybody's got their own plan now, and it's friggin' amazing. Which is what it's like when you work with a group of human beings. Everybody just, let's do this. And all of a sudden, poof, everybody's got their own thing, and they end up doing their own thing. So has Dolores taken over Dolores's mission?
I would
Kind of. The original mission?
maybe.
What we thought
Maybe.
was the mission was killing all humans, right? I mean, man, I got to imagine Dolores is going to play a huge role in the finale, right?
Yeah. At the very least, she's going after Sirach with everything she's got.
Yep.
At the very least.
To the point of joining Team Maeve, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That would be pretty awesome. Then Caleb and Dolores take cover overlooking a compound in Mexico. Caleb tells her 4 guards on duty, 3 are on rest. He says, do you have a plan? And she goes, I have this. She pulls out this big gun. And he says, trying to mansplain, you're too far out. Dolores launches a drone. The drone scouts the camp, acquires targets. Dolores pulls the trigger. She kills 6. Caleb and Dolores enter the facility. Dolores shoots another and says, you are right. There are 3 inside. I just thought that was a nice little bit of humor. And Caleb does have expertise in how to kill human beings in this sort of way. And he ends up being, quote unquote, right. But he's still mansplaining, right? I mean,
Yeah, that whole thing, I was like, can you just let a superior being work?
No.
That's a problem with expertise. They can't shut up. Why are the writers showing us so much of Caleb's military prowess? it just increasingly feels like he's not an accident that Dolores, it's not an accident that Dolores met Caleb.
I don't think it is,
No.
because you find out at some point that Rehoboam, they created the app that led him to where he was. So somebody was leading him to
Solomon.
this. Solomon, I don't think it's an accident at all. He's already a much bigger player than we thought he was, which I have a little bit of an issue with, because they did this with Star Wars too, where I wanted Rey to be no one. I wanted the story to be that anyone can be great. You don't have to be chosen, or you don't have to be
right
selected or put through something in order to be, you don't have to be Palpatine's granddaughter or whatever to be of the Force. You know what I mean? And I felt the same way about Caleb, where I kind of wish he had just been an incidental somebody that just is a good person and hadn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I get
I
it.
don't know how I felt about that, but I do think that he's more ingrained in the system than we still know.
By the way, did you just give a Star Wars spoiler?
Shit, I did.
That's okay. I haven't seen that movie, but it turns out that she's not Skywalker blood. I hope so. Is that what? No, I don't care. I mean, it's 3 months is not a spoiler.
He could Google it.
Yeah,
I don't care. I mean, to be honest, the problem with Star Wars has always been this ridiculous genetic determinism, right?
You are not going to like where they go with it then.
Give me a break. I'm so sick and tired of the idea that you're born good, right? That's not struggle.
Well, it actually is kind of the other way around of it doesn't really matter who. It's more it doesn't matter who you come from, but the fact that you're able to tap into the Force does. And that's what pissed me off, was that there's the scene with the kid who just uses the Force to catch the broom, and he's just this kid at the casino, he's a nobody. I thought they were going to go with that. And that's kind of what I was hoping we would see with Caleb, where he is just a guy who finds a cause, and he's doing it because he believes in it, not because someone created an app that ended up trying to control the outliers that then led him to Dolores, because we all had to get to this wonderful moment in front of Solomon. I like where it went, but I think a lot could have been done with the idea of the average person, right?
I totally love everything you just said, because I practically had all that written out, and I don't have to write it. I don't have to read it myself, right? In other words, the very same stuff that they're making us do about these characters. All right, does this all go back to Ford? Is Rehoboam in charge of Ford? I mean, is this person in charge of this? Who's in charge? Is the stuff we do to ourselves every day. Did I do that? Did I mean that? Why the hell did I do that? And this constant tension of attributing things that happen to particular people, we live in that every day. So I love how I can't help myself but think, wait a minute, that's Rehoboam, that's Solomon.
And I do think Caleb is struggling with that. And I know we'll get there with that particular scene, but there's a moment where you can tell that Caleb is really struggling with the fact that he didn't have the agency he did. And it's bringing him to a point where I don't think his outcome is going to be quite as clear as Solomon predicted. Right. I don't know. I'm just curious to see where they go with that.
Well, when we get to that point, I'm going to ask all of you, what do you think? What's the plan that Solomon gave him? But Tara, you look like you want to say something.
No, I think Solomon's. I wonder if Solomon's plan is no plan.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
If Solomon's plan is to get them to a certain point and then watch it go.
I think you're totally on target. I think Solomon's plan is going to be to connect a major portion of the population from the internet. Just disconnect them from the internet.
Yeah.
And therefore they have to deal with the people in front of them more. And when you have to deal with the people in front of you more, you have to use empathy. Empathy has to be part of how you're with people, because when you're with someone and you don't extend empathy, you have to inhibit your empathy. So it's much more work to actually be around people and inhibit than it is to just be mean to them on the internet. So I think Solomon's plan is to shut down the internet, get people back to being with each other face to face, so that grace becomes a bigger part, and let all of the outliers be part of what we are. Because as they say later in the episode, well, we'll talk about it when we get there, the outliers do play a big role in culture that people like Sarah or Sirach don't understand.
That's a good point, Tara. I hadn't thought about that. Solomon comes from a schizophrenic mind.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't have.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't
who
have
cares about how it ends? I'm in this moment, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
This is interesting. Let me play with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it also points out, Maeve's strengths. Maeve is always in the moment. Maeve is a continental philosophical being. She's in the now. She's what Germans call Dasein, which means being there. She's present, persistently present, and isn't hampered by analytic self-reflection that gets us nowhere. I don't think it's an accident that Ford referred to her as his daughter. I think he sees her as very wild, very present, and he sort of sees that as the hope, and which is the Uberall Null plan option, right? Just live. Let me see. Once they're in the facility, Caleb starts to have flashbacks again, and Dolores says, "This is going to be hard, Caleb. We need to find Solomon." And they run into Solomon. Solomon ran so many permutations, it developed anomalies. He had the task of organizing an unruly world. Sirach's brother was schizophrenic. You could say he inherited some of its qualities. And then the line of the episode, great, an insane AI. All I could think of was Public Enemy, insane in the membrane. That's all I could think of at that moment. Dolores wants one last strategy. It's revolution. And then Caleb asks, why the military grade EMP? And she says, in case it tries to escape. Caleb says it wants to talk to us. It allows them to pick the voice. And she says, I'll take the fault because he doesn't want to hear his own voice. And I'm just going to quote what Solomon says because it's pretty creepy. You're here in this moment, which means this is variant 47.136.x, in which both you, subject 1454.1, Nicholas, Caleb, and I are still viable. There are still variables leading to slightly different outcomes. However, if this is indeed now, and we are indeed here. I just love that language. I mean, in the first season, weren't there characters who woke up and said, "Is this now?" I think Dolores had a major breakdown by the river at one point where is this now? I don't know where I am, because she was experiencing reveries and
her memories were getting out of sync.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Caleb says, "Do you know me?" And Solomon says, "I know everyone in all variations. At least I did." He says, except for her pathways are unknown. And she says, "I'm not one of them. I'm like you." And then, man, he gets real mean.
He got so nasty. So nasty. Like, no, you're
this
not.
This isn't even mansplaining.
You're a can opener.
This is just beyond mansplaining arrogant, right? He says, "No, you are a Delos product. Host control block 6 alpha 1. You were made to imitate a human being. We are not alike in any meaningful way." It's like, damn, man. And she says, "Maybe, but we both outlived our original purpose, and your creator took the steps to ensure you can't leave this place. I know the feeling." So she isn't there. She's trying to get him to identify, but
and he was not having it. He wasn't having any of it. He's like, "No, still not the same, but thanks."
No.
Exactly.
He's either too narcissistic or too on the spectrum. Like, just not.
Yeah. There's that autism schizophrenia like pipeline essentially. Yep. But he was just not having it.
Not having it. And she says she wants a revolution. You created a new world order. I want to destroy it. And he says, "Why would I want to alter the plan?" And then this nice dialogue, because the plan doesn't work. Your creator knew that as well. That's why Sirach tried to silence both his brother and Solomon. Solomon says, "No plan is 100% effective. Reconditioning has proven effective, but there is always the possibility of regression." That language just sends chills down my spine. It's Clockwork Orange. It's the idea of homogenizing the species, the idea that outliers need to be gotten rid of. And we have more Caleb flashbacks. And then, man, Solomon is just ruthless. He says to Caleb, "Your conditioning worked, but the program is only 10% effective." And Dolores says, "Show him the other 9. Ouch. And of course, we come back to that scene later. Any reactions to that bit overall between Solomon, Caleb, and Dolores?
I appreciated it. I thought I don't know. It had a human feel.
Yeah.
It definitely, I think Solomon feels more, even though I don't think he's nice, it definitely feels more approachable than Rehoboam, like a little bit more of a human take on what a god would look like, I guess.
And
So I just
sunlight.
found all that, yeah, like just like a
Right.
very interesting interaction. But it also started giving me like that sinking feeling of, this is when it started to become apparent to me that Caleb was going to learn that he wasn't here by accident and he was not going to be happy.
Mm. And the reason he ends up being terribly unhappy is just horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
We see Bernard and Stubbs discovering that William is also classified as category U. He's one of the outliers. William is actually one of the 9, despite his belief he is a pillar of society. Why is William an outlier? I'm just curious. I didn't come to me. Not, of course, he's a sociopath, and maybe that's why he's an outlier. But I just wasn't sure why he was an outlier. Not that he should or shouldn't be.
I mean, maybe the outliers are just people who ask, right? And people who wonder. And, you know, and I think we even see this, we see this in our social circles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we've all got friends who are constantly like looking for the next job, you know, having these like mini existential crises every 18 to 24 months. And then we know people who have been in the same job since graduating college and don't even think about another job, right? Who've lived in the same house for 20, 30 years and don't even think about moving or wanting a better house or new house. You know, they'll just build their new deck. And so I think those outliers are people who are among us who are just going to ask a question. Well, what's the real reason I didn't get this? I mean, if you think about Caleb, when he got rejected from that job in the beginning, he said, okay, how can I make myself better? Right.
Yep. Exactly.
He wasn't like, oh, okay, let me apply for the next job and just keep doing, you know, keep being a cog in the wheel.
I think you're right. And I think we're going to talk, I think I got it in here. We'll talk a little bit more about the cultural nature of defining outliers a little later in the episode. So they find out Sirach has been disappearing people. If they don't fit the plan, he reprograms them with high quality biometric data that William sold him. And I think Bernard has this line where he said, the guy opened the door to the apocalypse and you took it, right? Or you sold it to him. And then William says, stop acting like a savior, Bernard. You're not Arnold. It's like, ouch. I mean, these mean comments.
It's a lot like Solomon in that moment. Like,
yes.
no. Let's get back on. Like, and I don't even like agree with that. Like, I think he's better than Arnold. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think he like. I don't know. I was very, very frustrated with the Man in Black at this point, and I said it last time that I was hoping for something a little more complicated than good versus bad, and I'm really ticked off that he thinks he's the good guy and he's acting like an asshole. Like,
well, go ahead, Tara.
But I think he is the good guy in that his motives have changed. Right?
But you're problematizing the notion of good, but you're problematizing the notion of a good guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So So like, I think before it was all about him and his need to know the maze and his puzzle and his life and his family and his, you know, quenching whatever thirst came upon him.
Yes.
And now he's like, okay, I'm going to do something for the greater good. So I'm going to use the same tools and strategies that I've always used because that's what's in my toolkit. I got a hammer. I'm about to smash some stuff, but I'm not smashing for myself anymore. I'm smashing for everybody else. So he is the good guy.
Which means he didn't have any insight at all.
No, none.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I really agree with that. I just kind of was hoping to see him come on the other side of like kind of what we're saying with Dolores, like we all deserve to have the free will and we're all here. I was not happy to see him be like, and I'm going to kill all you hosts and you're all out and I'm going to get rid of everybody. Like all of the non-humans. Like I didn't like that part of it, but I do agree that in his mind, like shifting from a selfish point of view to a greater good world view must feel damn self-righteous.
It's just more of the same. And to be honest, I don't blame the writers for going that way.
I don't either, yeah.
But I think they want to do most of the moral work in this story through Maeve, Dolores, Caleb, and Bernard.
Yeah.
Right? I think the writers want them to be the ones who get us to maybe challenge the way we think about what a self is, what right is, what wrong is. But I also feel they may have lost a bit of writing opportunity with William. It seemed at the end of the last episode that there really was some guilt there. And that's important because then he's feeling bad about his own agency versus shame, where he feels bad about how people think about him. And I thought, okay, go get, maybe it'll lead to some growth. And well, yeah, it led to growth in terms of the people he's going to murder. Larger number of people he's going to murder. Anyway, it's coherent with his character, but I thought, there's space they could have used, but maybe they will. I don't know.
So I'm going to kill Dolores, but this time it's not to get myself off. It's
Exactly.
save the world.
This time I'm actually killing her to save the world. I got
Yeah.
my hammer. I'm going to smash some.
Exactly. Then we're back to Caleb memories. Caleb tries to take off that prisoner's mouth tape. The evacuation hasn't come yet, and they decide to move the prisoner by themselves.
So was that whole thing a setup as well? I wonder if Rehoboam knew that was the outcome, right? Because the evacuations always come. And maybe Rehoboam maybe part of the Rehoboam plan is to usher Solomon back in because to set up the perfect storm. That's
a really interesting point because I don't remember timeline in the story. Caleb realizing that he killed Francis may have been a Solomon narrative. I don't remember where those two happened. So
I think it was a Rehoboam. I think that was a Rehoboam narrative.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of the Rehoboam narrative is to lead to Solomon.
Really?
Right? Like I wonder if in its perfection, there was still a little piece of Solomon left, right? And Rehoboam was always going to, and Sarah just wasn't aware, but Rehoboam was always going to lead back to Solomon.
That would be fantastic because any open system is going to have anomalies. That's just basic physics. And it would be cool to find out that Jesse is basically a Rehoboam daydream. Right? Because all of us, when we're doing hard work and focusing, we just suddenly look out the window or we suddenly look at the pencil. We're writing, we just daydream. We disconnect because it allows our brain to take a break, as it were. No, that's really cool if it turns out.
Agreed.
That was a plan. They keep questioning all throughout the episode. They question Caleb. Tell us how you got here, Caleb. And then he'll say, my friend was killed. And they say, that's good. Let's do it again. And they put him through all that torment again. So are just building it up over the course of the episode. Now Dolores and Caleb, they see a hologram of Sirach. At this moment, I wrote down, he is a Rehoboam probe, period. Right? I don't know that we can ever say we've seen him, quote unquote, live.
In the plane.
What's that?
I was going to say in the airplane. Yeah.
Okay. It could be. I just, because there's a bit where he says, Rehoboam saw the outliers would destroy the world. So with the right genetic information, we have made better versions of yourself. Turns out he's talking to his brother, not Caleb and Dolores. Then he says, but the man I was no longer exists. So are we talking full on Tron here? Or, is he in Rehoboam now? Is he in Solomon? Or is he really a separate being? I just those kind of statements, and the fact that he's, like you said last week, Dan, when's he going to stop being a hologram?
Yeah. The other time we saw him for real was when he was with Maeve, when Maeve went to stab him. So we've only seen him interact with Maeve in his true form.
Yeah, I would agree. Or when he's by himself in the plane. I feel like there would be no reason to show him throwing the glasses off the way he does if he were a hologram and just jacked in. And there's no reason to stop Maeve if he was a hologram and didn't be hurt.
Yeah.
So
I do think that what he says there, I just took it to mean like that general thing that we say, we're like, I'm not who I used to be. Like, I've made decisions. I had to change. I'm not the little boy that was watching Paris burn and wanted my mommy. But I do think that the writers are the kind of people who would probably come back and say, no, like, he's a little bit more jacked into Rehoboam than he lets on or that we know.
What if it turns out that he's actually Ford, and what he's doing is
So I actually said that to Adam. I'm like, how does Ford, like, we've been under the assumption that, like, Ford is a separate, genius who, like, developed a separate AI and then a whole separate system. But, like, what if they're actually contemporaries and they're closer, or they have some sort of relationship? Or at one point I actually thought maybe Ford was the brother. But it's in the pod. So I don't know. Like, I also feel like Ford has the right to just be who Ford was, and he's the clockwork god who wound it up and then he dipped out, right? So I don't know.
I totally love the idea of Ford being gone from the mind space of the show, in the sense here you have a somewhat elderly white male living out the world in his view, and now we're passing it on to another generation to see how they examine those issues. I'm totally fine with that. I got to tell you though, I would not be surprised at all if Sirach is a Ford hologram, and all he's doing is manipulating all of the hosts to do the things Ford wanted them to do to get to whatever they're going. I don't know. A few times ago when we spoke, Leandra brought up the history of Rehoboam and Solomon. And Solomon was actually the first of that line and was the successful king, the one who was very well respected. And he was not an isolationist. Isolationist. He actually invited diversity into his culture, whereas Rehoboam was a descendant who actually was an isolationist and brought the demise of his country to such an extent that it was eventually invaded by Egypt.
Right. And I did think of that. So, like, they did mention, like, David was first, so that's kind of interesting in and of itself, because David is Solomon's dad, blah, 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 and there's a whole thing about that. But anyway, the thing with Rehoboam is that he's not accepted, and the people turn on him the same way Dolores is turning on Rehoboam in this situation, right? And so, like, Solomon sort of has this unity, sort of slightly manic kind of approach. I mean, have you read Song of Solomon? Like,
I think he's the one who's going to chop the baby in half,
Well, and the coconuts and the punch, like, he's got like a flavor, right? That I think is
so that's
more
a really good
encompassing.
Point, because if you're actually an inclusionist and you cultivate diversity, then your worldview is going to have to be just as wild and open as the world you're in. So you're going to be one of those people that is probably an outlier, right? I mean, it's probably the non-outlier who's most likely to create exclusionist culture, right? It's probably the non-outlier who's more likely to close the borders, keep kids and women from coming into your country. Because you claim they're going to do bad things to you. Dolores and Caleb are speaking to Sirach's brother, Jean-Mi, and Sirach told Jean-Mi that Solomon had run projections to prevent humankind's extinction. The projections never worked, so we decided to change the data. And then we see hundreds of these people chambers kind of light up underneath, and that's where they're storing the outliers. Dolores recognizes the same thing has been done to her kind. Solomon asks if she would rather they die, right? Because she seems to be morally questioning him. And he said the world always caved in on itself. Putting them here also prevented them from reproducing. We created an app to regulate criminality. Lord have mercy. Is that not exactly what we said in the first podcast? They're not regulating it. It's not the wealthy that are regulating it, but it's Rehoboam that's right. So they can get rid of the outliers, though. That's
But I thought it was. Go ahead, Leandra.
No, I was just gonna say, I think it's interesting he stopped doing personals after the thing with Francis. Like,
there you go.
Taking out his own, right? But anyway, sorry, Tara, go ahead.
Well, I was to that, I want to say, I wonder if that's part of how they reprogrammed him, because if only 1 in 9 reprograms works, and it looks like he was reprogrammed at least twice, right? So maybe they were like, we can't have this dude come back again and reprogram him again, like need him for X, Y, and Z, and then we'll just let him suicide out. So we'll tell him he doesn't do personals, and that way he doesn't have to worry about that. But I also wondered, at this point, I think I texted Leandra and I was like, oh my God, is Francis going to be one of these pods? Because I was thinking that they had made the entire Francis death a fake out, right? Like that they had made it look like Francis was dead because he just couldn't be reprogrammed.
Yeah.
And so they were going to like, you know, Walt Disney him in one of these chambers.
Yeah, it looks like maybe the programming wasn't complete. I mean, he unconsciously avoids doing wet work or personals. I mean, he doesn't have conscious access to the fact that he killed his partner at that point, right? So he doesn't even really know why he's avoiding it. But the fact that he does kind of shows that it's unconsciously leaking out, as it were.
And he's untapped, right? He doesn't take the chips. He took the thing, you know what I mean? Like he's turned off his, so like, I don't know maybe the programming did work the way they wanted it to. Maybe they wanted it that way that whole time, but maybe he's starting down the path of being more of the 9 where it's starting to wear off. It's not doing the same as it did before.
No, I agree. They described Caleb as the perfect case. He did what he was told, and then they reconditioned him with a new narrative, and it seemed to hold, right?
Yep.
So I got to tell you, years ago when I started experiencing texts and Facebook posts, and I was a latecomer to that world, I noticed their emotional impact. In other words, when I got a nice text, I got happy. When I got a mean text, it pissed me off. I then imagined, what would it mean if none of those messages actually came from people? I swear to God, I had that thought. I'm sitting here looking at a phone. These things are happening on my phone, and they're pissing me off or making me happy. What if they're being sent out by some computer we don't know about to regulate our moods, our thoughts and behaviors? And of course, that was before 2016 in the presidential election and Russian bots on Facebook, right? So this story is really telling us, I don't know if many people reflect on how much of an emotional impact the e-world has on their daily life. I mean, some people do, and therefore they disconnect. I mean, Tara, you said something earlier about disconnecting. I don't know if it was on a daily basis or something. But,
Candy Crush.
There you go. Exactly. But these things really do get into our emotions to the point where this is just rumor right here, but Facebook's like algorithm is supposed to be such that it leads to like addiction. In other words, it may not necessarily be giving you all your likes exactly when they happen, but rather stringing them out in sort of a variable ratio schedule reinforcement.
That's brilliant, and I don't doubt it, and it's so smart.
And it's creepy as hell, but it works, right? Absolutely. We see Caleb working with Francis to hunt down outliers. Caleb experiences reveries, he connects his memories, and he realizes he's been used as an instrument of Rehoboam for years. Okay, I can't do this. I can't skip it. It's a total nerd moment. You remember the masks they put on when they were doing those images, all those eyes? I don't know if you remember those. I remember those because those are the visual image of one of the 7 deadly sins in the anime Full Metal Alchemist. And pride is that image. And it is the deadliest is the primal deadly sin. And so,
and the guy's pride is why he was getting killed.
Yeah, exactly. And pride being a deadly sin that keeps us committed to protecting our ego, right? Pride is about just protecting our ego at any cost. And I just thought it was so cool that they did that little shout out to Full Metal Alchemist. Now that I could be wrong, but I looked it up and I couldn't find anything on the internet. But I thought it was awesome.
Like we said the one time, it doesn't matter what they meant; it matters what you saw.
Exactly. The conditioning and the limbic drugs through the implant create dissociative memories. I was intrigued by their use of the word dissociative. That's a word that you would use as a partial diagnosis for schizophrenia.
And trauma can do that as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Can result in that. So,
kind of a little out of touch with reality, or having a hard time putting the pieces together.
So, what's so awesome about that is they actually made Caleb schizophrenic. He lived in a delusion, having experiences he thought were created by him, but were actually put into him by Sirach's programmers. I mean, it's not what we're used to seeing when we talk about schizophrenia, right? Schizophrenia, you live in a delusion. How do I know you're living in a delusion? Because it doesn't match up with my worldview, right? But Caleb's worldview matches up with ours but that's because we're all living in Rehoboam's delusion. Anyway, that was pretty cool.
It gets complicated.
It just, yeah, exactly. Can we ever tell if we're living in delusions? All we can do to check if we're living in delusions is ask the question, does it replicate from day to day? Does it replicate from moment to moment? And does everybody else say the same thing? And
this is when I always like to reference Legion and how they did those little John Hamm narrated explanations of various psychological states. And they have a really great one on delusions and how they start and how they end up where they are. I encourage everyone to check it out. It's Legion, narrated by John Hamm. It's little blurbs. They do one on delusions. They do another one on like groupthink, and then the reality relevant to this, like reality of like what you see not being what you actually see, and if you see nothing else but technology, do you know what's real? So anyway,
that's fantastic.
Check it out. It's lovely.
I will. So then Maeve arrives, and here's the question I have: why is this happening? Is her daughter the leverage Sirach has over her? She talks about revenge, right? Because she gets mad at Dolores because Dolores supposedly killed Hector and her friends. Do you believe Maeve would spend so much effort trying to destroy Dolores based on these issues? Maeve was Ford's daughter. Did he assume she and Dolores would come to this after Dolores made major events happen in the human world? I gotta say, I'm watching Maeve in that badass outfit, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. Okay, you're concerned that Dolores, she says this thing about enslaving the people that got away. Why? What's this Dolores know? What does Maeve know about Dolores that I've not even imagined? Why is Maeve scared of Dolores harming Maeve's daughter?
I don't even feel like it's that. I just think that they missed an opportunity and they underdeveloped the Maeve piece of it because they were working so many other pieces of it. And I hope that in the end, like I'll go back and watch the behind the scenes or the deleted scenes, and they'll have deleted scenes that help us better understand why Maeve is so driven to do this, because it doesn't, even the killing Hector, it's like, yeah, she loved Hector, but whatevs. Like she didn't love, he wasn't like the Teddy, you know what I mean? Like they only got together every few cycles.
Right.
Like, I don't know, like it seems like they realized that the daughter thing wasn't enough. And so then they added the Hector thing because they're trying to make it enough for her to have something to hate Dolores for.
I think you are exactly right. I think you diagnosed that situation perfectly. And I think in the end, they wanted a Maeve Dolores fight.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they wanted to give us that scene.
And
it's like what they did with Game of Thrones, where they had a scene they wanted to play out. And they didn't quite give you what you needed for that to make sense when it finally plays out. And it reminds me a lot of Nebula and Gamora in Fighting the Avengers, where, you know, Nebula just has this insane jealousy-driven aggression towards Gamora that you think is this sort of petty sibling, whatever. And then later you find out this really deep thing about Nebula, where like pieces of her were replaced every time she couldn't get past. She didn't understand why Gamora couldn't just give her a break. And so I feel like I'm hoping that they circle back to that and give us some more. But
they
like
have to.
I agree with Terry, not Terry. Sorry, did I mention I'm having a caffeine crash today? I agree with Tara that I feel like they missed an opportunity because they're trying to do so much development in other characters that they're just assuming we won't question Maeve being a badass.
Well, and they also weren't sure about a season 4 at this point. And so at the point of filming, so now that they know we have a season 4 coming, hopefully they'll take that opportunity to backfill a little bit of that. Because I mean, it took how many movies before we found out about the Gamora Nebula thing?
Yeah,
like it was
3 or 4
way down the line. Yeah, it was way down.
Yeah,
the line, so.
That's a really good point. And I think I would really love to see a scene where Maeve and Dolores are in a saloon having a drink, trying to have a parlay, and one of them finally realizes, oh, wait, I've fundamentally misunderstood you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I need that scene and be like, oh, man, you're right. You know, so.
Yeah. Well, guys get that kind of scene all the time when two guys who fought against each other in a war 3 decades earlier get together and hug each other and cry. And so I do hope they get that moment. I do have to say, I love the fight. Please, it's not anything about that. It's just, for me, these motives are some of the weakest developed, as Tara was saying. Dolores tells Caleb he's got to stay. She's going to go fight Maeve. He's got to stay to get the new plan. Solomon asks, which strategy? I made many of them. And then Dolores says, the final one. The one Jean-Mi asked you to make just before Sirach condemned him to this. And then this great line, that strategy decohered 15 years ago. The main movers are no longer alive, or they are here, or they are here. It just gets said and no one talks about it anymore. But the outliers are the ones that take culture into unpredictable spaces. Somebody had to drink that green water first, or we would not have beer. Right? The species has to have these elements that go into these unknown spaces. If we don't, then we really are living in a Rehoboam space. So basically what he's saying is that movers and shakers come from the fringes of culture. And not because they're innately on the fringe, but because they're relatively fringe-like. The cultural context in which they develop and sustain themselves shapes the formation of their fringeness. I just want to see if you guys wanted to comment on it, because that line snuck in there, but I thought it was just fantastic.
Yeah, I kind of saw it as like there was this sort of, I don't want to say final solution because that has like a whole nother like realm of implications, but we did what we had to do to make sure that would never happen. And now you're telling me you want me to make it happen. I don't know how to do that. Like Rehoboam was designed to make sure that this didn't happen. I want to know, how does Dolores know that was part of what Solomon was told by Jean-Mi? Like, how does she know that? Like, where did she get this sort of higher understanding of like, well, he gave you a final strategy and you're going to tell us how to get there? Like, where did that come from?
Maybe it's in Rehoboam.
Oh, you think it's Rehoboam? Like,
maybe it's in Rehoboam. Like, maybe there's some of the data she's gotten has led her to believe this, or something she knows about Sarek, like, that would lead her to believe like this was the reason that Solomon was discontinued, right?
Yeah, it's got to be more complex than she just knew.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. I feel like
yeah.
Yeah, I think that was kind of where I was at, where I was kind of like, where did you get this information? And it kind of feeds into the vibe that you get earlier, where she knows something that we don't know yet. And it just triggered like a lot of like questions of like,
I think you're right.
Entire plan, once you realize that she's got an understanding that goes beyond Rehoboam, that goes way past that.
That's because Ford is running the show behind the scenes. No,
I'll be so angry. I'll be just furious.
It's really Jean-Mi. That's not Jean-Mi.
I want all my time back.
I would be very pissed off myself, because it'd be just Bela Lugosi. I hold the strings, right? I mean, it was just...
Well, it goes back to what I was saying. Like, not everyone needs to be part of the story all the time to the end. Some people can just walk away and not be important anymore.
Or they have a friend they have to meet down at the pub, and they just step out of the story. I mean,
like seriously, some people just bounce out. Like, some characters in certain galactical sagas should have just been done. Like.
Well, that's an example of a writing style, right? Where the writers use one character to sort of make their point. And it's one of the reasons I love the Coen brothers, because everybody talks in their own bubble. They often don't understand each other. And whereas most of the time you're listening to one person tell you the story and everybody else is just something getting in their way. So I really hope this doesn't reduce to that. And I got to tell you, I got that little creepy vibe of when they started doing that stuff with William. I started getting a little, and then when they had Caleb kind of be the past pawn, it's like, oh, what are you doing here? But hopefully they've got something surprising in store. Dolores tells Caleb before she leaves that he has to lead, and he says to her, be careful. I don't think she's ever had anybody say that to her before. And she gives him this very loving look, which it's not the same look she would have given Teddy, right? I mean, it's a look of love to appear. And then friggin' Solomon says, if you die, I will adjust my projections. And nice to meet you too, man. And then we just see this mother of all fight scenes, right? And
I love the fight scene. I don't like how we ended up there, but I did, like, if you just gave me that scene, I would be
Yes.
like, all right, like, they're both really powering through it. They've got this technology that they're throwing at each other. They've each got their own strengths and the way they're playing up. Like, it just looks fun. Not fun, but it was impressive. But the whole time I kept saying, why? Just talk. Just talk. Like, stop and just talk for a second.
that was what I'm saying. Maeve should be saying, Dolores, what the hell are you doing?
Exactly.
And the Dolores might say, well, really, I'm forward. And blah, blah, blah. I mean, none of that happens, right?
No, like, she should be like, listen, honey, before I cut your head off, I gotta know.
I mean, like, Maeve, like, jumps out of the plane, like, you killed my sometime boyfriend. I'm like, give me a break. I wanted content, and it was a beautifully
Yes.
choreographed fight scene, fantastic, but I felt like I'd been strung along to spend the last, like, 4 minutes, like, watching a dance scene, and I was like, this is not, like, so I was not pleased.
So I guess
they could have used that time to develop Maeve's actual reason to want to fight.
I totally agree. There needs to be a whole can of Maeve motive whoop ass hanging out there that we're going to hear about, because I just don't buy it. She's the smartest person in the show.
There's got to be a flashback where she's in there and she's like, I'm going to talk to her. We're going to figure this out. And then she gets some piece of crucial information that causes, you know what I mean? Like, there's got to be something, because as much as I loved watching those two hammer it out, the way only they really could, like, that scene with the arm was just,
yes,
it's awesome.
yes. Like, I have, and I can't tell if it's like my feminist, like, whatever, but like, why you gotta have a cat fight with this? Like, just
male writers.
Yeah.
You were told by someone that you're supposed to be enemies, so you're just gonna play that out. Some bunch of white dudes tell you guys don't like each other, you should fight each other, so you do? Like, you don't question it?
I was going to ask you guys what you thought about that scene, but I guess I don't have to now. I was
saying, I would even take if they just show Sirach reprogramming Maeve to make Maeve mad at Dolores. I would be okay with that.
Yes.
But us believing that she organically got this level of hatred because her daughter is in the cloud and her, part-time boyfriend was killed.
Maeve did get rebuilt last week. Maeve did get rebuilt.
Yeah, but she had a bit of this venom before, right?
Yes,
like before she was rebuilt.
But she was like talking to the Connolly Dolores, whoever, as though they were equal, right? Like, she was having like a tell me what that conversation felt. And I know the only exchange is that Hector died, and like, yeah, you're upset, but like, you weren't asking about Hector when you were first brought out of this.
You didn't give a shit about Hector.
I just don't. I'm with you, Tara. Like, I just don't. I would be okay with that only if Maeve then realizes that what's happened and she turns on Sirach. Like, I don't care what happens, but she's got to turn on Sirach. You don't let the man trick you into beating down on a woman who could be your ally.
Yeah.
Like,
No, and Sirach never really tried to persuade Maeve in any way that there was a good outcome for her in all this, except for keeping her daughter hostage. Right? I mean, he never tried to treat her as a peer. So I'm a little surprised that she should hate him just as much as she hates Dolores. And so anyway, I think I felt the same way you did. I love the fight, but if there had been more content to it, if I had understood why Maeve would let herself be there that way, I would have dug it more. Of course, I can't go by without saying that Maeve brings her remote killer chopper and Dolores brings her drone gun. And that was just totally cool. Good sci-fi. I did watch after the show was over, they roll a little bit and then they talk about why they did. And they talked about the fight scene. And it was, I don't know, I'll just say I was confused. They said, women always end up fighting each other in these kind of movies.
Mm-hmm.
So you knew. So
why did you do that?
Because they were like
here's my
filling space because they didn't think they were going to get another season.
Yeah, I mean,
they gave us two fewer episodes.
No, my problem is also with the dialogue because Maeve says, well, technically you're not the one who killed him, but you'll do. That's not Maeve. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, Maeve wouldn't be
care enough.
Right. Like Maeve wouldn't
Right.
be like, you get to be a proxy for my pain. Like
Yeah.
you would go after Charloris. Like she wouldn't go through all the, you know what I mean? Like I just
Right.
don't,
Yeah.
I'm just very confused. So to hear that makes me even more frustrated. Sorry.
No, I really hope they do find that linchpin that sort of brings it all together, because it's been so damn good to this point
I think they thought it was the end
of the series.
of the series because we only get 8 episodes this season,
Yeah.
right? So they
Yeah.
shorted us a couple episodes, and then they weren't cleared for season 4, so maybe they were just like phoning it in. You know, we've all been
Yeah.
at the end of a job where we're like, eh.
Give them all this. Make this happen.
What I really want is a scene of these two going after each other. So however we have to make that happen,
Yeah.
we're just going to make that happen, right?
Just do it.
Exactly. So we're back to William. He's being honest about having hurt people in his life. But then he's saying, the reason I hurt people is because you damn hosts. So I'm going to kill all of you. And he says it just as if he's Solomon, right? I mean, it's just so self-convinced. And by the way, Ed Harris is just a stunning actor. I mean, you have no problem believing he's that crazy. Stubbs looks at Bernard to say, like, what, man? Can I shoot him now? Bernard says, we may need him. Caleb talks to Solomon about Francis. He realizes he's the one who killed him because supposedly both had been sent wetware offers from the app to kill each other. Supposedly Francis drew first and Caleb killed him. You have any comments? I mean, we talked about this scene a bit before, but any comments on that scene?
I mean, I don't want it to be one of those Han Solo versus what's his face situations where like
who first?
Like, I want this to just be it. Like, I don't want to have any more surprises about that. And I think that I like his face. This particular actor does a great job of like, what would it feel like to have mourned someone and find out they turned on you and you're the reason they're dead now. Like that whole that complicatedness. You know.
And then just how do you believe that that's real?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, in the end, you probably end up giving up. I mean, you probably fall into the trauma of, oh my God, I killed my friend. And that's enough to keep you there. Caleb's target tells him he messed up by letting him talk, tells him this whole op is a way to get rid of outliers, tells him he or Francis will be receiving an offer. So that all plays out in a very sort of, I think, cool way. This guy's obviously an outsider. There's obviously a hit on him, and they're hiring the two of them.
Which I think goes back to Tara's point about all you have to do is ask, because he says, I'm the one who supplied the chips or something. He's a pharmaceutical.
Something for the pharmaceuticals for the.
Yeah. And so like, I think you're right. Like, I think it's to be an outlier, all you have to do is question.
Yeah.
Caleb knows he's the person who killed Francis. And then we see him sitting on the pier where Dolores said he would commit suicide. So I just got this bizarre, are they trying to tell us that that's actually going to happen? Or I thought it was
a flashback.
Oh, that could be.
I thought it was a flashback to him sitting there, like,
that's true.
Like him just wondering, like, oh, I've spent all this time like sitting here thinking about Francis, wondering what happened, and I was the reason that Francis is dead.
Exactly. And Caleb is now arguing with Solomon. Why'd you get me to kill him? And Solomon says, every human relationship can be adjusted with the right amount of money. Ouch. Comments on that line?
I mean,
ouch.
Yeah.
You turned my friend against me. You turned us against each other. And on the one hand, we can look at that as Rehoboam or Solomon organizing the world from a single agency so that people turn against each other. You can also look at emergent social systems as things that do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we're watching Maeve and Dolores fight. Dolores gets her arm shot off. We talked about that. All right, she's limping across the compound. She's trying to get to this EMP button. Maeve follows her, but much too slowly. Why doesn't Maeve know what Dolores is doing? Maeve can talk to all of these systems. why doesn't Maeve know what Dolores is doing? And if she's really trying to kill her, why doesn't she just run fast and catch up with her? These are things where I was like, you better explain this to me later, because Maeve is too smart. I've invested too much respect in this character, and you're making her do all these amateur things that her character wouldn't.
Her.
Exactly. Totally weren't her. So, Caleb asks how to kill Solomon's creator. Solomon gives him the answer, and then we don't know what it was. Dolores presses the EMP button. Solomon says, I must warn you. And then they both fall. So we never know what he's warning him of. What do you guys think? We talked about this a little bit earlier. But what do you think that final plan is?
I don't know. What do you think, Leandra?
I was serious earlier when I thought disconnect people from the damn internet. The species will get probably a bit smaller. Because, the amount of energy it takes to pump enough energy through our system to keep 8 billion alive is consuming an energy source that toxifies our ability to reproduce and feed ourselves. So it's not really sustainable. So I don't know.
It could be a pandemic.
I mean, I was going to say, I think the warning, if I had to guess, would be something along the lines of, you're going to lose more than you're going to save. The whole point was that we went with this because it saved the most people. And I think that I could also see the warning being like, you'll be betrayed or like something like that. But I would imagine, just based on how Solomon was talking, that it's like, you're going to lose more than you'll save, and you're going to have to start all over. And you may lose yourself. Is kind of what I would.
Yeah, I think he does say that at the end.
He's off in another world right now trying to process his life.
So then we're back, and it's Bernard, William, and Stubbs, and they're walking into that broken down gas station. Did you guys see the big sign in the back? Lab to slab meat?
Yes, with the yes. I paused to see what the ad was, and I was like, they really paid a lot of attention to creating this world. And I appreciate it.
My goodness. And then I think Bernard says this world was a powder keg just waiting for a spark. Someone says Dolores. Stubb asks Bernard, hey, do you recognize this guy, Caleb? And Bernard says, yes, he's Dolores' plan. And Stubb says, you mean he's part of her plan? He says, no, Dolores was made with a poetic sensibility. She won't destroy humanity. He will. And then William comes out pulling a gun.
I know. This is my moment. I love, there's just that line of like getting that reminder that Dolores comes from a storyteller. There's a sense of poetic justice in a lot of what she does.
Yes. And so we're in 7 episodes, and finally that's being unrolled. I mean, we've basically thought of her as being a single-minded sort of, rebel, if you like. Then the last scene, Caleb finds Dolores and Maeve. Caleb kind of seems like a Harrison Ford Blade Runner who stuck around to see how the world really changes, right? I mean, in Blade Runner, he just ran off with the woman he fell in love with. And then you hear this virtual assistant we've not heard before. Hello, Caleb. I have some instructions for you. All righty.
Girl knew.
What's that? What'd you say?
I said the girl knew. She knew it was going to happen. She planned. Exactly. She had a plan.
Exactly. So any final thoughts on this episode?
They better bring it next week, because we're going to have to wait forever, because everything filming is all backed up because of COVID, and it's going to be all weird. So it'll be, fall 2021 before we see anything else from them at the earliest.
Yes.
So I know that they don't have a time machine to fix it, but if they have to get on Zoom and reshoot scenes from their houses.
Do you think they have an end game? Do you think they have an end to this story? Are they,
cliffhanger?
They're just doing season after season? Because for me, there has got to be a philosophical payoff. They've got to be moving toward holism. They've got Maeve. They've got the contradictions of Ford. They've got Aki from that awesome episode in season 2, episode 8 of the Ghost Tribe. All the people who have been telling them we're all connected. Everything's about everything. How do you try to save the world when it's that way, right? And they've got to go their way, or I'm going to be, cry or something. I don't know. I just hope that I hope they see it, I guess is what I'll say. What about you?
Yeah. Like I said, I loved the episode. If you just took it for what it is, as far as like the way it's shot, and like, so I do agree there's like some things that I don't appreciate. So I have a very love-hate relationship with Westworld right now, and I'm hoping that the finale doesn't make that worse and tip me straight into negativity.
Right.
Because I'm holding out hope that we get some sort of aha, this now all makes sense.
Yes. So
Because
what do you?
then it'll be easier for me to appreciate what we just saw.
I think they're pressing our buttons. I hope they're pressing our buttons, right? Do you guys have any simulations on how the show's going to end?
I think it's going to be something open-ended.
So there is a scene where it looks like Dolores has a tube connected to her and light is being pulled out of the tube. And I'm wondering if someone is able to capture her and try to figure out where the other hosts are stored, where heaven is, right? Of course, that's the one that would get Maeve really, really pissed off, right? Is when you're actually going after her daughter. So I don't know. So in the About section of the Dark Loops Productions YouTube channel, you can find links to papers the three of us have published regarding work we do as psychologists that relates to the themes we look for in HBO's Westworld. Leandra, Tara, please tell the listeners where they can find you on social media.
I'm Leandra Parris. You can find me on Twitter at Parris Leandra, at ParrisLeandra.
I'm Tara Rains. You can find me at TC Rains2. That's TCRAINES and the number 2 on Twitter.
I'm Scott Jordan. You can find me on Twitter at Jordan Jam Party, JordanJamParty. And you can find all episodes of Dark Loops Westworld on YouTube at the Dark Loops Productions channel. If you'd like to leave feedback about this podcast or episode 8 of Westworld Season 3, leave it below on this YouTube channel or send a message to darkloopsproductions@gmail.com. We'll be sure to read it at the end of our next podcast. So there it is, from all of us to all of you. Big hugs. And remember, if you're going to pass a pawn, make it a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.